So 2 weeks ago, I did a video telling my story about how I was disfellowshipped, excommunicated from my church 13 years ago. And since that video came out, I have been overwhelmed and flooded with messages from you guys, such encouraging messages, but also some really heartbreaking stories from you about how some of you were shunned or disfellowshipped from your own churches or asked to leave your church, really hurtful things. But the biggest thing I kept hearing over and over again was you guys asking, so how do you forgive? How do you get past it? What's the next step? Because I want to find God again. And when I started getting all those messages, I was like, okay, this needs to be our next topic of conversation. We have to talk about this. And the topic of forgiveness is so deep and there's so much. I've been reading my Bible and reading books and preparing for this, and I realized I cannot squeeze it all into one video. So this is going to be a two-parter, and this first video is going to be on why should I forgive that person or those people. And the second video is going to be a very detailed step-by-step, how do I forgive those people? Because if you guys are like me, it's all fine and dandy for someone to come to me and say, oh, you need to forgive. Really? Okay, great, thanks. I would rather have some step-by-step detailed hacks, forgiveness hacks. So that's what the video next week is going to be about. Okay, so let's get started. The reasons why you should forgive that person. Reason number one. This is going to make some of you annoyed. I may lose some viewers as soon as I say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Reason number one. Because God said so. Do you guys ever say this to your kids? I've caught myself recently. Who am I kidding recently? I've been saying it for years. Make your bed. Why? Because I said so. Because God said so. This is the problem with Christianity and the Bible. I think a lot of people get the wrong idea about the Bible. We look at the Bible and it's like, it's a rule book. Do this, don't do this, or else. These are the consequences. These are all the rules. The Bible is not a rule book. I like to look at the Bible as a user manual. Do you guys have a drawer in your house full of user manuals for things like your air fryer and your dishwasher? The creator of these appliances came up with a user manual so that you would get the most out of your product and it would have the longest life. This is what God has given us when He gave us the Bible. There's troubleshooting tips. He is the creator. He knows everything about us and what's going to make us the happiest and help us the most. So He gave us this self-help book called the Bible. It's not a rule book, and it's not something that we should resent because it's really there as a gift for our benefit. So when God tells us in the user manual that love prospers when a fault is forgiven, but dwelling on it separates close friends in Proverbs 17:9, we need to listen to the manual. Don't we want more love and peace in our lives? That's what forgiveness brings us, love and peace. See, I think we have this misconception that, well, they don't deserve to be forgiven. Yeah, I totally and completely get that. Guys, I have 58 single-spaced pages of letters from church members telling me what a horrible person I am and that I'm going to hell. 58 pages. All of the people who wrote those, by the way, never asked for my forgiveness or even been remorseful because they felt like they were doing the right thing. God says when we forgive, we're not doing it for the other person. We're not doing it for them. It doesn't bless them or hurt them if you choose to forgive them or not forgive them. It blesses us when we do choose to forgive them. And here's another one God puts in the user manual for us. For if you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. Matthew 6:14. Raise your hand if you need forgiveness. I need forgiveness every day. Forgiveness is so important to me. Without forgiveness, I am nothing. I have no hope. There's no future. There's no eternity. I need God's forgiveness. This verse tells us that if we aren't willing to forgive others, God is not willing to forgive us. So that enemy that you have, that person who's burned you so badly and done horrible things to you, when you don't forgive them, you are allowing them to come right in and create a giant roadblock between you and God's forgiveness. Don't give them that. Don't give them that power over you to stand in the way of your own forgiveness from God. Those are pretty big deals right there. Reason number 1, do it because God says so. Reason number 2, why you should forgive that person. The body keeps score. Did you know it impacts you physically when you withhold forgiveness from another person? This is science, guys. This is medicine. JohnHopkinsMedicine.org talks about, I think it's just hopkinsmedicine.org, talks about how that you raise your blood pressure, you're more prone to depression, your heart rate changes, you have a greater risk for heart attack, diabetes, cancer, all of these things that crowd out your body and take over when you are holding a grudge and bitterness inside of you. Wow, that's pretty crazy. And I can attest to this personally. See, I went through years of being like, I'm not going to forgive. They don't need to be forgiven. I'm doing fine. I'm going to go on my merry way. And I started getting horrible back pain. Eventually ended up with a mass in my pelvis. It was benign, but it was a painful mass in my pelvis the size of a cantaloupe. A cantaloupe. I had to stop doing photography. I couldn't drive. I was in pain all the time. I saw chiropractors. I was scheduled for surgery. I went through all these dietary changes. And finally, when I was in with my physical therapist, she said, Courtney, there's nothing more we can do for you physically. Whatever this is going on inside of you, you are cinched up like this. And I'm going to suggest you do some journaling or praying or counseling or whatever you need to do to let go of this stuff emotionally. And then I think you can be healed. I was like, what? Okay, whatever. So I was pretty desperate. I was in a lot of pain. I took her advice. I went to go see Sasha Channel, who I mentioned in the last video. You guys need to schedule with her if you haven't reached out to her yet. She's so incredible. I spent several months in life coaching and Christian counseling with Sasha Channel. And at the end of all of that, when I was able to let go and forgive and cry and pray and cry and pray and cry and pray for hours, I went back to the doctor, and in 3 months' time, I am not going to cry. I'm such a crier. My mass shrunk from the size of a cantaloupe to the size of a cutie orange. And we canceled surgery. And my doctor was scratching his head, literally looking at the results on his laptop, scratching his head like, I don't know what you did, but whatever you did, keep doing it. Those were his words for me. Not forgiving someone takes a toll on you physically. Reason number 3 why you should forgive that person is because it takes its toll on you mentally. And this is closely linked with taking its toll on you physically. When you can't forgive someone and you're harboring all of that in your heart and in your thoughts, it crowds out your mind. And I know that you guys will understand this. The older that you get, the less capacity I feel like you have in your brain. My 8-year-old daughter's like, why can't you remember anything? And I'm like, because my chalkboard is full. The brain is like a giant chalkboard, and the more you write on it and the more you fill it out, the less space that you have. I think it's the same way when we have bitterness and grudges in our hearts. They fill up all of your capacity, and you don't have room for the good stuff. And God talks about this. In Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23, he says, keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. Our hearts are the headwaters for everything that flows out of our lives. And we have to guard our hearts and our minds for this reason, because if you get all of that nasty stuff filling you up, it's going to choke out the joy and the peace and the blessings in your life. Not forgiving people totally destroys your mental space. Reason number 4 why you should forgive that person. If you don't forgive, your spiritual growth will be stunted. In Matthew chapter 18, Jesus tells the parable of the unforgiving servant. See, there was this king, and he was calling in all of his servants and collecting all of his debts. And he called in this one guy who had such a massive debt. I imagine that it would be comparable to $100 million today for us. Something that you could never pay back, that would be impossible. And it was usually the custom in those days. Like if you couldn't pay your debt, you were thrown in jail till you could pay it, or you and your wife and your children were sold into slavery to help pay the debt. So this servant falls on his knees and starts begging the king, please, 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 I'll do anything. I'll work off the debt. Just please don't do this. And instead of the king saying, okay, I'll let you work it off, the king says, you're forgiven your debt completely. Just go. It's forgiven. He takes it all away. And the servant goes straight out from there, and he finds somebody else who owes him like $20, grabs him by the throat and starts choking him and says, pay me what you owe me, pay me what you owe me. And this guy's like, please, please have mercy on me. Please be patient with me. I'll pay it all back. I promise. And the servant says no. And he throws the guy in jail for the $20. The king hears about it. And the king comes and finds the servant and throws he and all of his family in jail. He's furious. And this is how the parable ends. This is what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 18, verse 35. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart. I don't want my spiritual growth to be stunted, for me not to be able to move forward in the forgiveness of God's blessings because I'm holding back and I'm not willing to forgive others. I've been reading Kyle Idleman's book this week, Grace is Greater, and I'm going to totally paraphrase what he says because I love this thought so much. Basically, he says, God is not chasing you to collect what you owe him. He's really chasing you to give you what you could never afford. Oh, I wrote that one down while I was reading because I thought, oh, that is so huge. When you really stop to think about everything you've been forgiven for, it makes me want to go chase down someone who has wronged me and to give them something that they don't deserve. My forgiveness and my prayer for blessings on their lives, because it's what God's done for me. So hopefully, after all of those reasons, now we're in the proper frame of mind to get ready to forgive those people and to find that love and grace in our hearts. Please tune in to the next video where we will go through the forgiveness hacks. I love that. The step-by-step process of what I went through personally to help me with forgiveness, and I hope it will be helpful for you too. Please like and subscribe. I love having you guys here, and I'll see you next time.